The scent of freshly brewed coffee and blooming jasmine typically filled Sarah Jenkins's home, a comforting aroma that was the signature of her peaceful mornings. Her house, a charming craftsman bungalow nestled on a tree-lined street in the Dome, quiet, suburban town of Oak Haven, California, wasn't just a building. It was a sanctuary she had meticulously built over the past decade. Every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall, every book on the shelf held a memory, a part of her journey. Sarah was an architect, respected in her field, with a stable, fulfilling career at a reputable firm in the city. She designed spaces that brought people joy, structures that stood strong against the elements, much like she believed her own life was. Her days were a predictable rhythm of creative challenges at work, evening runs through the park, and quiet. Weekends spent gardening or hosting friends. She had a strong support system. Her best friend, Emily, a constant source of witty banter and unwavering loyalty. Her parents, who lived a few hours away but were always just a phone call or a weekend visit apart. And her kind, elderly neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, who looked out for her like she was their own. Life wasn't perfect, of course, but it was good. It was stable. It was hers. Then came the day everything changed. Before we move forward, please take a moment to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our next dramatic tale. Your engagement helps us bring more compelling stories like this one to life. It was a Tuesday, a routine day. Sarah had gone to work as usual, leaving her home bathed in the soft morning light. She worked late on a complex project proposal, fueled by lukewarm office coffee and the quiet hum of computers. It was dark when she finally pulled her car into her driveway around 8:30 p.m. She noticed the front door was slightly ajar, which struck her as odd. She distinctly remembered locking it that morning. A shiver, cold and unwelcome, traced a path down her spine. She pushed the door open slowly, the familiar scent of jasmine replaced by a strange, stale odor. The air felt heavy, wrong. Stepping inside, her foot crunched on something small and crystalline. She flipped on the living room light. The scene that greeted her stole the air from her lungs. The room was a disaster. Cushions were ripped, drawers pulled out and emptied onto the floor, lamps toppled over. The antique mahogany desk, a family heirloom, had been brutally forced open, splinters of wood scattered like confetti. A sickening wave of nausea washed over her. It wasn't just the mess. It was the feeling of violation, of unseen eyes having rifled through the most intimate corners of her life. Heart pounding, she moved cautiously through the house. The bedrooms were worse. Her mattress had been flipped, her closet ransacked, clothes strewn everywhere. Her jewelry box, a gift from her grandmother, lay open and empty on the floor. The drawers of her dresser were pulled out, their contents dumped carelessly. In the kitchen, the pantry was emptied, cans and boxes littering the floor. They had even gone through the refrigerator. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. She clutched her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911. Speaking to the dispatcher felt surreal, the words break-in and burglary feeling alien in her own home. The police arrived swiftly, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, their voices calm and professional, a stark contrast to the chaos inside her head. They canvassed the house, took notes, dusted for fingerprints. One officer pointed out the forced entry through the back window. A pane of glass neatly cut, the lock expertly bypassed. This wasn't a random opportunistic act. This was planned. The realization of the extent of the loss began to sink in as she walked with the officers, pointing out what was missing. Her laptop, critical for her work, her tablet, several pieces of expensive camera equipment, all her jewelry, inherited pieces, gifts, and items she had bought herself, gold necklaces, diamond earrings, a sapphire pendant, a watch. The small safe hidden in her closet was gone, containing emergency cash, $3,000 she kept for unexpected expenses, important documents, and her most cherished pieces of jewelry, including her grandmother's engagement ring. But it wasn't just the material items, valuable as they were. They had taken her sense of safety, her peace of mind. The feeling of someone having invaded her private space, touched her things, gone through her life, was deeply unsettling. It felt like they had stolen a part of her. The emotional fallout was immediate and overwhelming. That night, she couldn't bear to stay in the house. Emily picked her up, her face a mask of concern, and took her back to her apartment. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of Emily's old building sent jolts of fear through her. Shock gave way to a simmering anger. Anger at the violation, at the loss, at the sheer audacity of it. This was followed by despair, a heavy, suffocating blanket that made it hard to breathe. How could she ever feel safe in her home again? How could she rebuild after such a devastating loss? The next few days were a blur of phone calls, police, statements, and the grim task of assessing the damage. The struggle to rebuild felt insurmountable. Where did she even begin? Taking stock of the situation was the first brutal step on the long road to reclaiming her life. The police report was filed, listing everything she thought was missing. The detective, a kind but weary man named Detective Miller, explained the process. They would investigate, look for leads, but burglaries were tough cases, often with little evidence. Then came the insurance adjuster. Walking through the damaged house with him, cataloging the stolen items, felt clinical and cold. He asked about purchase dates, values, receipts. Many items, especially the inherited jewelry, had no recent appraisals or documentation. The insurance policy had limits. The valuable camera gear was only partially covered. The cash was likely not covered at all. The total value of the stolen goods, she estimated, was easily over $70,000, not including the sentimental value of the heirlooms, which was priceless. The damage to the house, the broken window, the forced desk, the general mess that would require professional cleaning, would add another few $1,000s. Her deductible was $1,000. She quickly realized insurance would cover only a fraction of her loss. Starting from scratch felt like standing at the base of a mountain she had no energy to climb. Her house felt contaminated, unsafe. She needed new housing immediately. Emily helped her find a short-term rental apartment a few miles away. It was small, sterile, and utterly devoid of the warmth and familiarity of her home. Replacing essential belongings was an overwhelming task. A new laptop for work, basic clothing, toiletries, kitchen essentials. Every purchase was a reminder of what was taken. The financial strain was immediate and intense. She had savings, but they were meant for a down payment on a larger apartment, or a renovation project, not to replace everything she owned. The insurance payout, when it eventually came, was lower than she had hoped, leaving a significant gap between her loss and the compensation. But Sarah wasn't alone. Her support system rallied around her. Emily was a rock, helping her pack up what was left of her salvageable belongings, listening patiently as Sarah vented her fear and frustration. Her parents drove down, bringing necessities and offering practical help and emotional comfort. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson checked on her house, watering her plants and keeping an eye on things. Her colleagues at work organized a collection to help her replace some essentials, a gesture that brought tears to her eyes. The community in Oak Haven, hearing about the break-in through local news or word of mouth, offered help. Meals, donations of household items, even offers of temporary storage. It was humbling and heartwarming, a stark contrast to the cold act of the burglary. This network of support was the lifeline she desperately needed, preventing her from sinking entirely into despair. They reminded her that she wasn't just a victim, she was a person surrounded by people who cared. Reporting the crime had been the first official step, but the wheels of justice turned slowly. Detective Miller was sympathetic and diligent. He kept her updated, though often with little progress. They had found a few smudged fingerprints, not Enough for a positive identification. There were no witnesses, no clear leads. Burglaries, he reiterated, were notoriously difficult to solve unless the perpetrators made a mistake or the stolen goods surfaced somewhere obvious. Sarah didn't sit idly by. She felt a burning need to do something, to feel like she had some control in a situation where everything had been taken from her. She started by making a detailed inventory of everything stolen, complete with serial numbers where possible, descriptions, and estimated values. She provided this to Detective Miller and her insurance company. She started visiting local pawn shops, armed with descriptions of her more unique items, like the vintage watch and the sapphire pendant. She checked online marketplaces like Craigslist and eBay, searching for items matching hers. It felt like a long shot, a needle in a haystack, but she couldn't just do nothing. This relentless pursuit of answers, this piecing together of the puzzle, became almost an obsession. It channeled her anger and frustration into a focused energy. Navigating the legal system added another layer of complexity and frustration. Dealing with the police investigation was one thing, but understanding the process if an arrest was made, the potential for restitution, the likelihood of ever seeing her belongings again, it was all daunting. She learned that even if someone was caught, recovering stolen property was often difficult. Items might be sold, melted down, or moved far away. The legal process itself could take months, even years, with trials, appeals, and bureaucratic delays. The uncertainty was draining. Months passed with no major breakthroughs. Detective Miller followed up on every small lead, a potential sighting of a suspicious vehicle, a tip about someone in the area suddenly having a lot of cash. Each lead that went nowhere was a small heartbreak. There were days when despair threatened to consume her. Would she ever get justice? Would the people who had violated her home and stolen her sense of security ever be held accountable? The thought of them getting away with it was almost unbearable. But the search for answers continued. She talked to her neighbors, asking if they had seen anything unusual that day. Mr. Peterson mentioned seeing a white van parked down the street for a while, something he hadn't thought much of at the time. It wasn't much, but she passed it on to Detective Miller. She also started paying more attention to small details she might have missed before. Had anyone known she kept cash in the house? Had she talked about her valuable jewelry? Who knew her routines? The thought that someone she knew, or someone connected to someone she knew, could be responsible was a chilling one. One afternoon, while browsing an online forum for vintage jewelry enthusiasts, she stumbled upon a listing for a ring that looked strikingly similar to her grandmother's engagement ring. The listing was in a nearby town, posted by a user with a generic-sounding handle. Her heart leaped into her throat. It wasn't an exact match from the photos, but it was close enough to send a jolt of adrenaline through her. She immediately contacted Detective Miller, providing him with the link and her suspicions. Detective Miller acted quickly. Online marketplaces often cooperated with law enforcement. They were able to trace the seller's account to an address. It wasn't her address, but it was an address in Oak Haven. This was the first real break. The long, arduous journey since the break-in had fundamentally changed Sarah. The initial shock and despair had slowly given way to something stronger. Resilience. She realized that she couldn't let the theft define her. She refused to be a victim. The act was devastating, yes, but her life was more than the sum of her material possessions. She had her health, her career, her incredible support system, and her own inner strength she hadn't fully appreciated before. This adversity, as difficult as it was forcing her to confront her own limits and discover a deep well of fortitude she never knew she possessed. Reclaiming her identity became a conscious effort. While she was pursuing justice, she was also actively rebuilding her life on her own terms. She started small, repainting her house, choosing colors that felt fresh and hopeful, buying a few key pieces of furniture that felt like her, not just replacements. She focused on her work, pouring her creative energy into designing beautiful, functional spaces for others. She reconnected with her hobbies, spending time in her garden, finding solace in the simple act of nurturing growing things. She wasn't just replacing what was lost. She was creating something new. She was building a life that was perhaps less focused on accumulating possessions and more focused on experiences, relationships, and personal growth. The experience had given her a new perspective. The things that had felt so important before, the expensive jewelry, the latest gadgets, now seemed less critical. She had lost them all, and yet, she was still standing. She was still her. This led to a deeper appreciation for what truly mattered: the love and support of her friends and family, the simple comfort of a safe home, even if it was temporarily a rental, the beauty of a sunset, the joy of a shared meal. This sense of gratitude, born from loss, was a powerful force. The lead from the online jewelry listing, while not directly leading to her grandmother's ring, had been the thread that began to unravel the mystery. Detective Miller's investigation into the seller led them to a woman named Maria Rodriguez. Maria had a history of minor offenses, mostly shoplifting and drug possession, but nothing of this magnitude. However, further investigation linked Maria to the white van Mr. Peterson had seen. The van was registered to Maria's boyfriend, a man with a more extensive criminal record, including past burglary charges. The pieces began to fall into place. It turned out Maria had done some cleaning work in the Oak Haven neighborhood, including occasionally helping out at a house a few doors down from Sarah. She had likely observed Sarah's routine, noted the type of car she drove, and perhaps even overheard conversations about valuables. She had chosen a time when Sarah was known to be at work. The police executed a search warrant at Maria and her boyfriend's apartment. They found some of Sarah's stolen electronics and camera equipment, identified by serial numbers. They also found tools consistent with breaking into a home, including a glass cutter. While they didn't recover the majority of the jewelry or the cash, they had enough evidence to make arrests. This was the turning point in the pursuit of justice, the moment the abstract idea of accountability became real. Maria and her boyfriend were arrested and charged with burglary and grand larceny. The legal process that followed was lengthy and emotionally taxing, but Sarah felt a sense of purpose. She provided testimony, recounted the details of that devastating day, and described the impact it had on her life. She learned that Maria's motive was desperation, drug debt, and a need for quick cash. The boyfriend was the one with the knowledge of how to break in. The karma, or perhaps justice, unfolded in the courtroom. The evidence was strong. Facing the prospect of significant prison time, Maria agreed to a plea deal in exchange for testifying against her boyfriend. He, in turn, was convicted and sentenced to a lengthy prison sentence. Maria received a shorter sentence due to her cooperation, but still faced time behind bars and the weight of a felony conviction that would impact her life long after her release. For Sarah, sitting in the courtroom, watching the people who had taken so much from her face the consequences of their actions, wasn't about celebrating their downfall. It was about witnessing justice being served. It was about reclaiming the power they had tried to strip from her. They might have taken her things, but they couldn't take her future, her spirit, or her right to feel safe in her own home. She didn't get her grandmother's ring back. She didn't recover the cash or most of her jewelry. The material loss was still real, but seeing them held accountable, knowing they couldn't simply disappear back into the shadows, brought a profound sense of closure. She had pursued justice relentlessly, and she had found it, not in the return of possessions, but in the affirmation that their actions had consequences. She had taken back control of her narrative, moving from being a victim to a survivor who had actively pursued and achieved a measure of justice. Sarah's story didn't end with the court case. It was a turning point, but the rebuilding continued. She moved back into her renovated home, the fresh paint and new furnishings slowly replacing the ghosts of the past. She installed a state-of-the-art security system, a practical step that also helped her regain a sense of safety. She began sharing her story, first with friends and family, then cautiously with others. She spoke at a community meeting about home security, recounting her experience with honesty and vulnerability. Her message was one of resilience. She wanted others facing similar challenges, loss, violation, despair, to know that it was possible to rebuild, to find strength in adversity, and to refuse to be defined by what was taken from them. She highlighted the power of community, the invaluable support she had received from Emily, her parents, her neighbors, and even strangers in Oak Haven. It was that network of care and support that had lifted her up during her darkest days. It reinforced her belief in the fundamental goodness of people, a belief that the actions of a few criminals couldn't extinguish. Finally, her story became a call to action. She encouraged people to be proactive in protecting themselves and their belongings. Simple steps like securing windows and doors, installing alarm systems or cameras, keeping valuables in a secure location, and being aware of their surroundings could make a significant difference. She also urged them to document their possessions, take photos, record serial numbers, get appraisals for valuable items, steps that would be invaluable if they ever became victims of theft. Sarah Jenkins's life was forever changed by the break-in. She carried the scars, the lingering awareness of vulnerability, but she also carried something new and powerful. The knowledge of her own resilience, the depth of human kindness, and the quiet satisfaction of having pursued justice and reclaimed her life piece by piece. They had taken her things, her sense of security, her peace of mind. But she had taken back her strength, her hope, and her unwavering belief in her ability to build a life that was not only secure, but also deeply meaningful. She had taken back what was truly hers, loved Sarah's incredible journey of resilience, and how she fought to take back her life. If you were moved by her story of devastation, pursuit, and ultimate justice, show your support. Give this video a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our next powerful tale of overcoming adversity. Your engagement helps us bring more compelling stories like Sarah's to life.